Welcome to TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we are going to kind of wrap up our series on used inventory in AIM. We're going to be focusing on inventory purchases today. An inventory purchase is where you, as the store, buy outright a product from one of your customers, as opposed to taking it in on trade or bringing it in for some kind of consignment agreement. But as always, when we do these live streams, I like to hear from you. So over to the right, if you are here and watching, click the chat tab over there next to the playlist dropdown, and that will bring up the chat window. Down at the bottom there, you will see a nickname button. Go ahead and click that nickname button and key in your name, and go ahead and then say hi and let me know that you're here. I will be monitoring the chat as always for any questions that you may have, any insight that you wish to provide regarding how maybe you use the purchase process at your store. This is a place where we can ask questions, we can share tips, anything to help you and everyone here maximize your usage and productivity with the AIM software. So, with that in mind, let's go ahead and switch over to my demo program. So where we've been doing all of these demos as always, and I'm going to apologize right now because I still have a little bit of a cough left over from earlier in the month. But just like always, we're going to jump into exactly what we mean when we talk about the topic. And like I said, with regard to purchases, this is where you buy inventory outright from your customers. Now, I like to use the drop-down menus, but feel free to use the same concept for setting up your touchscreen buttons. If you just always want to have a button right at point of sale or right on your main menu to go to these processes, you certainly can. But you will find the functions regarding purchases in your modules menu. From there, if we go to inventory, halfway down you will see a menu dedicated to consignments and purchases. Of course, we're going to be focusing on the purchases functions today. There's technically two ways to bring something in on purchase. There's what we call the batch mode, and then there's what we call just straight up enter purchase. Now, 9 times out of 10, you'll probably be just fine with the batch mode. So we're going to focus on that, and then later on we'll take a look at what we would just call the normal enter purchase mode. Batch mode implies that you are essentially taking in multiple items, and they may or may not actually exist in your inventory. As always, regarding to used inventory, we need to know and we want to track who the customer is that is bringing these items in for the purpose of selling to the store. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep on using my main guinea pig, Mr. Mike Anderson here. And once you select your customer, or necessary, if you add them if necessary, you come to what we would call the purchase form, or the purchase batch mode screen. Now, if you watched my live stream on consignments, or if you've already been using the consignment process, this screen probably looks pretty familiar to you. In fact, that's because we use pretty much the same form. In fact, the only thing really missing is anything relating specifically to consignments, such as consignment payout percentages and things like that. But the whole idea behind this is up here at the top left. If there are multiple items that you are bringing in, and they are very similar. Say, for example, if you are a shop that is a furniture shop, and you are buying outright a set of tables and chairs, and they're all matching, and you want to create individual records for those, feel free to go ahead and make selections up here for the category and the subcategory. For example, I might select a furniture category and then choose, for example, dining tables or lounge chairs or any other categories that I might have. For our purposes, so I'm actually just going to go ahead and not worry about that. I don't have a way to clear that out, so I'm just going to go right back into that form. So once again, modules, inventory, consignments, purchases, and batch mode. We'll pull up Mr. Anderson. So if you're only pulling in 1 or 2 items, or they're just kind of scattered all over the place, they're not very similar, feel free to leave those blank. Now, I'm going to direct your attention up here along the top. You are going to need to make a selection of either creating a new SKU or adding to an existing SKU. As you are probably familiar with, AIM tracks all inventory by SKU records, and purchases are no exception. We're just basically adding, it's just a different way of receiving in product. So we need to either associate this with an existing SKU, or we can say we're going to create one. And in probably most cases, you're just going to leave it as add a new SKU. Now right below that, you're going to see where it says create temporary SKU. I apologize if that's a little small. I don't have a way of really making it much larger, and then the scaling kind of throws off things, so I apologize for that. But the whole idea of a temporary SKU is if the product that you're bringing in is probably not something that you ever intend or are capable of restocking. If you do, great, no big deal. You would simply bring it in again. But in most cases, if you're creating a SKU on the fly, it's probably one that is only going to be useful for the time when this product is in stock. So by leaving it as create temporary SKU, once that item actually is sold out of your system, then it will go ahead and essentially hide that SKU. So it doesn't show up on search results and all kinds of things, and potentially just cluttering up your inventory with a mass of SKUs that are just all in there sitting at quantity 0. And then we're going to leave this check marked as pop details window during add. If this is something that you do a lot of, you may want to uncheck that, and there is a system variable that determines whether that is checkmarked or not by default when you come in. But let's go ahead and click the Add button. You'll see that this brings up an item details screen, and you are essentially just going to fill in the blanks of what this new temporary SKU is. Starting at the top left, you'll see that it's already created a SKU number and model and serial number for us. So it just is using our ISS, our in-store SKU process, and it's just using the next number in line. If the item has an actual model, serial, item number of some sort, by all means, you can replace these fields with the actual model and SKU and so forth numbers from the product itself. But if it's something where there's no packaging, there's no indication of what the item is, you don't have the time or want to take the time to look that info up, feel free to just use these placeholder record numbers that AIM is generating for you. If at some point down the road the item is still in stock and you discover, oh, this item was actually model number 12345 or whatever it might have been, you can use the program of change SKU serial to go in and change those details. But for now, you can just leave them as is. Of course, the one exception to that rule might be if you are a firearm store and you are buying a firearm outright from the customer. Of course, for the purposes of keeping compliant with the ATF, you are going to want to make sure that you override the model and serial with that pertinent information of the actual model and serial for the bound book report. Otherwise, we're just going to go right down the list and fill in what is necessary. And as far as what is necessary, there's really not a whole lot. You do want to make sure you choose whether or not the item is going to be considered serialized or accessorized. We're going to leave this as serialized. You're going to pick the most appropriate category and subcategory. Let's pretend this is an appliance today. Let's say that we are bringing in a refrigerator, and it is made by Amana. We're going to leave the description as is. Of course, we can override that with whatever we want. Of course, any SKU attributes that are applicable to the category and subcategory, you can come over here and flesh that out as needed. But apart from these first handful of fields, the only other things that you need to fill out are going to be a cost and a selling price. So right here in the hour price field. The main idea with this is whatever you put in for the cost is what you are going to pay outright to the customer. So let's hypothetically say that we're going to give this customer $100 for their old used Amana refrigerator, and we're going to attempt to sell it for, let's say, $175, just to throw a number out there. If we wanted to, we could fill out any other details at this point, such as a minimum price or price A, B, or C, or anything else like that. There are some buttons here where if we click this, if you've got some default pricing set up in maintenance, this would display here, and then you could use that as a selector to pull those in. Those are going to be set up in your subcategory maintenance areas. You could also set up what are called cash or credit percentages. So by clicking either of these, if you've got those percentages set up again in the maintenance part of the system, it can take the amount here and calculate the cost based on either if you are going to give them a cash payout or if you are going to give them an in-store credit payout. A lot of times, a lot of stores like to emphasize in-store credit over actual cash payouts because it encourages the customer to turn around and spend that money with them at the store. So you might have it set up where we only give them a 50% payout for cash or check or other form of payout, or we give them a 60% in-store credit value based on what we are going to try and sell it for. So you can definitely have all of that set up. Ultimately, though, once you've got this minimum amount filled in, so again, the SKU through the description, the model, the cost, the selling price, and the serial, and any attributes if necessary. When you click Save, you'll notice this basically shows up here on this listing. And then if there were a second or third or fourth item, you simply click that Add button each time. Now again, I mentioned with this Pop Details function, if we uncheck that, what you'll notice is for each time we click the Add button, we see a line item appear here. We don't necessarily need that details window. We can just fill the details right here on the form, much like you can do with consignments. So in here, we could come over here and we could say we're receiving another appliance. This time it is a dishwasher, and the description is dishwasher. The price that we're going to have is, let's say, $50. And over in the manufacturer, let's just say that that is once again Amana. The Amana is not on there, so let's just say it's let's just say it's $5.11, just to throw something in there. And then over here in the cost, we can put in what we're going to actually pay outright for it. So let's say it's $20. And then of course we can then override the serial, the model, the SKU, any of those details right here on the form itself. If we need to, we can always click the View Details button while we're highlighted on that, and you can see it brings us right back in where we were at if we had let that details window pop up during the time of doing the entry. But that's the basic idea of it, is you're really just using this to not only create the inventory SKUs on the fly, but also receive these in. Now, just to keep it clean, we're going to go ahead and remove that dishwasher. So we're just doing one item at a time for the demonstration purposes here. I'm going to go ahead and click this Delete Item button, and we're going to go ahead and confirm that we want to remove that. So we're focusing just on the one item. And then let's go ahead and click the Save button. Actually, before I click Save, I just want to point out a few other things down here at the bottom. You'll notice there's an option to print labels when saved. So if you do have this check marked, let me get my big old fat head out of the way. If you do have this check marked, any label printers that you have set up, as soon as you hit Save, it'll go ahead and generate some barcode labels, some description labels, whatever format you have set up for the appropriate subcategories. It will generate one each per item received. If you want to add another batch right away after doing this first batch, you can have this check marked, and it'll be for the same customer in case they want to split that up into multiple batches for whatever reason, maybe for their own in-house accounting. If they are actually doing a lot of sales for business practices, maybe they want to sell some on one batch and sell some on another. And if you wanted to just save this as a proposal purchase without necessarily committing these, you could check mark this option of saving as proposal, which would then essentially say, okay, here's what we quoted you for these products, but we haven't actually brought them in yet. And then if they come back later and say, yes, we're going to go ahead with that, you can use this button here to pull in that previous purchase proposal that you had generated for them. While we're here, the consignment button that you see right next to that is a way where If a customer has previously brought something in on consignment and it is not selling, and the customer says, you know what, just give me whatever you'll give me for it, and I'll sell it outright to you. You could use this to pull in any pre-existing consignments and just convert it essentially from a consignment to a proposal, especially for all of you in the firearms industry where you don't necessarily need the extra ATF bound book entries of it being brought out as consignment and brought back in as purchase. This will do all of that for you without necessarily having to have all of those extraneous records in the ATF book. When we go ahead and hit save, what we will see, let's see, it's coming up and saying we are missing the manufacturer. Okay, what happened to the manufacturer? Let's go back and fill that in again. So yes, we do in fact want to add that. So there we go. Now it should have it. So you'll see when we click save, it's now asking us, okay, remember we told the system we're going to give the customer $100 payout for that. And we're going to give that to them in the form of a cash return. So we'll just click the cash return button. It'll default exactly to that. And then we can go ahead and finalize, and the customer will then get their receipt, and the item will already then be in inventory. So if there was someone right behind them in line that says, hey, I want to buy that refrigerator, or hey, I want to buy that doohickey, whatever it was, it is now fully ready to go. No need to do anything else. If this were a firearm, of course, it would have also then popped up at this point with the ATF record, the acquisition details for you to confirm all of that information. So there we go. Inventory purchase. This is something that you can give to the customer as a receipt for the benefit of their record keeping, that they did come into your store and sell you this product with that particular serial number and all of that other detail. We gave them, in this case, a $100 cash payout. So there we go. That is the whole idea of an inventory purchase. Now remember, I mentioned there are two ways of doing purchases. We looked at the batch mode function, which, like I said, is probably going to be good for 90 to maybe 95% of your purchases. But for the times where you know that the item is already in inventory and you just want a more, let's say, straightforward form for bringing in products on purchase, you can go to what's called the enter purchase, not the enter purchase batch mode. So with enter purchase, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pull up the customer, and you can see this is more like, I guess, more in line with like a receive inventory screen. It's going to ask us what is the SKU that we are receiving under, and if you need to, you can press F6 to do a search. You could technically add a SKU on the fly by clicking the add button down here, and you would see that this would actually then bring up the add change inventory form, and we could then fill in the blanks of all of that there. The whole idea with the batch mode is that it essentially streamlines this process. So in most cases, I actually recommend the batch mode. But like I said, if there is something already in inventory, you know it exists, and you just want to use the purchase form because that's the one that you prefer, no problem. Let's just pretend we are bringing in a guitar here. So we'll go ahead and select this Dave Mustaine guitar. We will select that. And as you can see, it is bringing up all of the details of this particular model, the cost, the price, all of that. All we basically need to do is give it the serial number. So just to keep it simple, I'm going to click the ISI button to have it generate one. It'll default the code as used because if it's being brought in by a customer, there's really nothing that we could do that would that we could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the product is brand new, unless of course it's actually in the original shrink wrapped package and all of that. I doubt many people out there have access to a shrink wrapper. So it will default to used. You could also, if you really wanted to, you could switch it to either new or potentially refurbished. If you want to give the item a stock number, you certainly can. If you wanted to have AIM generate one for you, a stock number is essentially just another form of a serial number that you could use for in-house tracking. Feel free to use that. If you do know that there is some sort of manufacturer warranty still available with it, you can fill that in. But what we want to do is we're probably not going to give the full normal cost in the form of a payout to this customer. So we can see it's got $5.99 in here for the cost. Let's go ahead and say we'll give them $300 for it as opposed to $600, and we're going to turn around and sell this particular serial number, this ISI 1005, not for $855.71, but for, let's say, $549.95. And if we wanted to, we could also then fill out the other forms. We could click the auto price button here if you already have auto price formulas set up to calculate these price points based off of margins or markups of the cost or any other detail that you desire. There are, of course, the same buttons here for cash and credit percentage amounts. If we need to, we could fill in the attribute and any other notes that we want to do. But you'll notice when we hit the save button, it basically takes that detail and it adds it to the form above. And now there is an add button available down here in the event that we were also bringing in any other items on purchase for the customer. If we click that, we can see it's basically now going to do the process again. Maybe we're bringing in an amp to go with the guitar. Maybe we're bringing in a microphone or any other kind of accompanying accessories that we want to track separately from the item. We can add all of those in as their own unique items. For our purposes here, we're just going to go ahead and click cancel, and once again focus just on the one item. And you'll notice that when we go ahead and hit save here, it's basically more of the same. It's going to ask how we are paying out that $300, and again, just to keep it simple, we're going to go ahead and say we paid them cash, and we'll finalize that, and they will get their receipt. The receipt itself will look no different than the receipt from the batch mode process. So you'll see when we click in here and just bring it up on screen, it's the exact same thing. Headline of inventory purchase with the purchase details, the date and the account number, the employee ID who was logged in, who the customer is, what we brought in on purchase, and then the payout. What this is doing is this is not only adding to your inventory immediately of these products, but it is keeping track of all of these for your own record keeping as well. So if you ever need to go back, excuse me, just one second. Sorry, I had to clear my lungs there. So if you ever need to go back and run a report on all of these items that you are bringing in on purchase, you certainly can do so. One point of note, you might notice when we go in and look at the reports in inventory, there is no specific purchase menu. There's consignment reports and there's trade-in reports. The purchases are actually underneath the trade-in reports. There's actually one report kind of dedicated to the listing out of received trade-ins and purchases. When we go to run that report, we can put in the purchase date range up here, and then we can choose the filter right below that of either both or only trade-ins or only purchases. Let's just do this. We'll do today through today. And of course, we can then specify a particular account number if we so desire. That's a customer account. Again, with that, you could make a selection in there by F6, so we could then list that out there. I'm not going to do that. I'm also going to clear that accidental selection of the location. I'm going to leave that blank for all. I could, if I wanted to, break this down by categories by making specific selections. All of this has the ability to have report preferences saved. So if you wanted to have this in the form of an automatically generated report at the end of each day or week or anything like that, you certainly can. And then you would then ultimately click the Run Report button, and we'll just show this on screen. And there we go. We've got the inventory trade-in and purchase, so it's listing out those dates, the serial numbers received, the descriptions, and then the category and subcategory numbers, the employee who was logged in at the time, the reference number, the account number, and then the payout amounts. Thank you so much, Justin, for the get well soon wishes. I am much more on the mend now than I was. Came back with a slight case of COVID from that trade show earlier in the month. So, but all is much better, and just got a little bit of a lingering cough. So yeah, that is the whole idea with the purchases. with the few minutes that we have left here in my scheduled time, I do want to just jump in and take a look at a few system variables that you may find super handy. So if I go ahead and just drill down to purchases, we've got the purchase hide line prices. So this variable controls whether line item prices will be hidden on the inventory purchase receipt. You may find that especially handy if you just want to, if you are doing a lot of mass purchases and you don't necessarily want, or the customer doesn't necessarily need to know the individual values that you are giving for each item. If on the receipt you just want to see that they have the total value, having this enabled can certainly help with that. And then the purchase one-off, this variable controls whether the checkbox to create a one-off SKU will be checked on the enter purchase module. So remember, that's the whole idea of the temporary SKU. If you want that check marked by default, you leave this as enabled. If for some reason you want them forever and ever in your system, you can come in here and uncheck this, and then you can that way you could then check mark the whole create temporary SKU on an as needed basis. So yeah, those are the two main variables that kind of focus on purchases. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So let me know if there are any questions regarding purchases. Again, really the whole idea is it's just another way of accurately tracking your inventory so that way you can go back and view that history at any point and know exactly where it came from. In fact, I just remembered there's one more thing I want to show you, and that is the history on the individual customer account. So if we go into customers and customer history, and we'll pull up Mr. Anderson, we can go on this drop down to the consign trade purchase history. Click go on that, and this way we have the exact listings of everything that we ever brought in used from this customer. It defaults to showing all activity, and we can see that there are actually 3 purchases of record on this customer, one from way back in November of 2020, the trade-in that we did earlier this month, which was more than likely the one that we did on the previous live stream this month, and then the 2 purchases that we did today. And if you needed to, you could always come up here and show just one or the other or the third of that specific history. If you only wanted to see it for specific date ranges, you certainly can. And then when you click refresh on that, that will update this listing. And then if the customer needed a snapshot of this for their own record keeping, perhaps their taxation purposes, you could always click the print button here and then give them a copy of that, so they have exactly everything that they had ever essentially sold through you, either on consignment, trade, or purchase, along with all of those price points there. So yeah, that's the basic gist of that. I just want to make sure that I had mentioned that. Okay, so I think that pretty much wraps it up, unless I see any questions come in regards to purchases. I do want to just go ahead and take a quick peek at my schedule. So over to the right, if you click back off of the chat tab into the playlist tab, looks like we have 2 more specific live streams coming up, both in the month of July. So on Tuesday, July 12th, we're going to be focusing on looking at kits, what we refer to as kits that you assemble in-house, and also package deals. What is the difference between an assembled kit versus a package deal as far as AIM is concerned with how they're handled in either respect? And then the Tuesday, July 26th is the second edition of Ask the Professor. So the first one went pretty well. The whole idea of an Ask the Professor session, it is an extended session. Normally these are about half an hour long or shorter. With the Ask the Professor session, I extend that out to a full hour so that people can come and go as they please and ask any questions that they want of me, and that way you have my full attention. We can just jump in, and it's basically like a an a la carte type thing, maybe where a topic that you have in mind doesn't necessarily need to take up a full live stream session, but it's something that you still would like to see in this type of format. Bring those questions to that Ask the Professor session. That being said, if you're not sure if it's something that we could do in an Ask the Professor, or if it's something that would warrant a full-on dedicated live stream session, up at the top you'll see there's a poll option on the toolbar up at the top. Don't click it right now because you'll jump away from me. But if you do have any ideas for future topics, go ahead there at your convenience and use the form on the poll tab to submit your topic ideas. And we will be using those for the months of August and September and beyond. If I deem that it probably wouldn't fill an entire live stream session, I will certainly use that for the purposes of filling in time during the Ask the Professor session. So, with all that in mind, I hope this has been beneficial. As always, the recording will be over in the recent live streams playlist, back over on the videos tab of this video page. And if there's anything we can do for you in the meantime, don't hesitate to give us a call. You can reach to our support department at any time during our normal operating hours for any questions you may have. If you want to ask questions of myself directly, you can always email those to training@tritechretail.com. We've also got the online training sessions that are dedicated to you for an entire hour. I'm coming on site again. And so, yeah, we've got all kinds of ways to help make you successful with our solutions. So don't hesitate to let us know about what we can do to help you out with that. That being said, let's go ahead and wrap up today's session, and we will see you in, 2 weeks? Yep, 2 weeks. So hope you're all doing well, and we'll see you then. Take care.